Hi, and welcome back to Pick Up the Pieces. I'm Stacy, and we're in the pickup kitchen today making dinner. Tonight we're having country fried steak with mashed potatoes. We're going to try a new recipe for creamed corn, and we're also going to make some Red Lobster style biscuits. So this meal is one that we absolutely adore. We got snowed in one Christmas. It was a couple of years ago, and the weather forecast was calling for a bunch of snow, and I think we kind of underestimated what was going to happen. And we had all of our kids over, and I believe it was like December 19th or 20th, or it was pre-Christmas. And the plan was for the kids to come visit. Our older kids live out of town, and they kind of make the rounds between us and other family members. And so they were going to stay with us for a couple of days, and then they were going to move along. And well, we got so much snow that weekend that they never left. And so we had all of our kids for probably 5 days, and most of those days we were stuck in the house. We couldn't get out. And it was actually really fun. And because of the fact that we weren't originally going to have all of our kids for Christmas, we really, at that point that the storm started, we hadn't planned a Christmas dinner yet because we figured we had plenty of time to plan it, get to the store, grab whatever we needed. But then the storm happened and we never got to the store. We never got out of the house for several days. So we kind of had to do with what we had, and it turns out we had some cube steaks in the freezer. So that Christmas, for Christmas dinner, we had country fried steak. And so it's kind of a nostalgic meal for us because it reminds us of that snowstorm when we got stuck with all of our kids unexpectedly. And so I'm going to kind of recreate that meal tonight. Now, the first thing I'm going to get going here is a big batch of mashed potatoes. If you've watched the channel for any amount of time, you might have seen me make these before in previous videos, but we're going to make a big batch of mashed potatoes. And usually when I make a big batch of mashed potatoes, I'll do a 5-pound bag of potatoes, and then if there's leftovers, that's fine. We'll use them with leftovers during the week if there's leftovers of the country fried steak, or we'll freeze them and then we can pull out a quart-sized container of them anytime we need mashed potatoes. So I'm just going to finish peeling and chopping my russet potatoes here. I prefer russet potatoes for mashed potatoes. I think the texture is good. I don't like using yellow potatoes. I find them just to be too waxy for mashed potatoes. I like the texture of the russet better. So we're going to get these going. Then I'm going to make my creamed corn. This is going to be a new recipe for us. We haven't had this before, but I think it's going to be great. And then we are going to make some biscuits and then fry up some steaks. And probably by the time we're frying up our steaks, our potatoes should be almost ready. So hopefully the timing of everything works out the way we want it to. So I am going to finish chopping these up. Now this recipe I will link in the description for you, but the country fried steak recipe is from Paula Deen. And years ago I actually got to meet her in person, and she signed my cookbook, and it's right back there. And so I'm following the recipe in her cookbook. And the mashed potatoes, that's my recipe. And then the corn recipe, that came from www.saltysidedish.com. I'll link that in the description for you. And then the biscuits are from a box. So I'll link those also, like a link where you can get them in the description as well. Now the key with these potatoes to get them to boil and then for you to be able to mash them successfully later is to cut them in equal size pieces. So just make sure that your cubes or potato chunks are roughly the same size. Now I'm going to give these a rinse because as I'm putting these in my cold water, I'm noticing that my water is getting cloudy. If you have really cloudy potato water when you make mashed potatoes, that may cause your potatoes when they're mashed to be really gummy and starchy, and you don't want that. So I will be right back with fresh water. I rinsed these potatoes, so as you can see now the water is much clearer, and I'm going to put these on the stove. We're going to get these boiling. And I'm going to cover them so that they come to a boil as fast as possible. And now we're going to go on to our biscuits because I want to get those in the oven, and then I'll go and make our corn, and then I'll make the steak. So I am going to grab my ingredients here. Now these are the biscuits that we make. They're the Red Lobster brand Cheddar Bay biscuit. They come from a mix. They're great. I've tried a copycat version of this before, and it was good, but I mean there's kind of nothing as good as the OG. So we're just going to stick with what we know. And I buy these big, huge boxes of the mix at BJ's, and then make them when we want them. And then when we go there and shop, which we do every couple of months, if I want more or we're running low, just grab another box so that way I always have them on hand. I was talking earlier about that snowstorm we endured. We had 7 people, I believe, in the house for 5 days, and we did not run out of food. We got low on milk, and then it ended up somebody in my neighborhood had some extra milk and shared it with us, and that saved us because nobody could get in or out of the neighborhoods. There was literally like 7 feet of snow in the driveways, in the streets, and they had to bring in like diggers to like literally dig out the snow. Like regular snow plows couldn't get through it, and there was nowhere to put the snow. They had to dig it up with diggers and put it in like trucks and truck it out of the area. It was wild. So all this to say that I always make sure that I'm kind of stocked for an emergency. We do rotate through what we have in our cabinets. We do rotate through what we have in our freezers, but I do like to have a good stock of things in the house that I could pretty much make anything I want with, because in the event that something like that happens, we were doing pretty good. So anyway, this recipe involves our mix and some water and some cheese. So I will just take the envelope of the mix, and I've got my oven preheated to 425, and then I just have a tray here lined with some parchment. And so I'm going to add in my water to the mix, and then it said 1/2 cup of cheddar cheese, and I think I'm just going to measure that with my heart. A little more cheese is not a bad thing. So there we go with that. And I'm going to combine this in my bowl here with my Danish whisk. The Danish whisk is nice for sticky doughs like this. If you try to use a regular whisk, everything gets stuck in the balloon of the whisk. But the Danish whisk is nice because you can mix everything up pretty quickly, pretty easily, and it doesn't get stuck. And you don't have to then, pick everything out. So I can just kind of flick off this little bit of dough that got stuck on the whisk very easily, and then get these scooped out. So the recipe on the box says, stir with the water, the cheese, and the biscuit mix. Scoop 10 portions, approximately 1/4 cup, and that's what this measuring scoop or cookie scoop will scoop for me. And we're going to put them 2 inches apart on a sheet, and then we bake 14 to 16 minutes. Then when they're done, we will melt this 1/2 stick of butter and add this seasoning packet to it and brush it on the top, and that will be one of our side dishes. So get this scooped out. And I love using a scoop for this because when you use a scoop, then every biscuit will be an equal size or roughly an equal size. And then that way you don't have some biscuits that are big and some that are small. They will all tend to cook at like the same time. So they're all going to be done at the same time. And you don't have to worry about some biscuits getting overcooked and some getting undercooked. Let's see, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, well, I guess we're going with 12 because it made 12 instead of 10. That works for me, and that is perfect timing. That is our oven coming to temperature. So I will just scoot this one over a little, go like that, and now we have 12 perfect biscuits going right into the oven. We're now going to make our creamed corn. So this recipe, when I read this recipe online, to me, the instructions in this recipe don't make a whole lot of sense. So all that to say that I am using the ingredients exactly as written, but I'm not putting the recipe together in the way that they say to do it in the recipe. I'm doing it the way that makes more sense to me. And so I will show you how I'm going to make this. And I'll link the recipe in the comments for you. So if you want to make it as they make it, I cannot attest that that would work. I don't know if it does because I'm doing it in a slightly different way. So the recipe calls for some butter and flour. And so we have a tablespoon here of some butter We're going to melt this in our cast iron pan. And we're going to make a roux with some butter and some flour. And this whisk is amazing. It is a silicone coated whisk, so it won't scratch up your pans, but it is very heat resistant. So I absolutely love this whisk for that reason. And then you're not going to hear a whole lot of scraping, horrible metal sounds while I'm doing this. So it's a win for me, and it's also a win for you. So this then is a tablespoon of flour, which I'm just going to get here into my butter. And we're going to cook the raw the raw flavor out of that flour and just get the fat of the butter and the flour kind of mixed together so that it will thicken the liquids that we put in here. So it is just a small amount, but that's okay. And this whisk is doing a good job of getting anything that's sort of on the side of the pan here to combine. So you're just going to mix this and let it cook until the flour smells kind of nutty and nice and not raw smelling. And then we're going to add some milk. We've got a half a cup of milk, and I'm just going to whisk this in and let it thicken. And this is what is basically a roux, is basically a fat and a starch that you cook together that then will thicken a liquid for you. And so that is a half a cup of milk. I'm using 2%. And I just want to combine that roux with the milk and whisk it together until we don't have any lumps. And this mixture is going to thicken, like you can already see that it is kind of thickening. And now it's nice and smooth, so we can proceed with adding the rest of the ingredients to it. So the rest of the ingredients are some half and half. Now, if you don't have half and half in your house, because I did not, you can use half heavy cream and half milk. That's what half and half is. It's half heavy cream. So quarter cup of heavy cream, quarter cup of milk. That's what we did here because I bought heavy cream for another recipe that I'm going to make this week, and I didn't want to also buy half and half. Groceries are expensive these days, so whatever way I can save at the store, I'm going to do that. And so we kind of made our own half and half here. And I'm just combining this half and half with my milk and my flour and my butter mixture. And while that comes kind of back to a bubble here and starts to thicken, I'm going to season this. And now that's come to a nice bubble, so I will add a tablespoon of sugar, I'm going to add some pink salt, a couple pinches of that. And some fresh cracked pepper. Give this a whisk. And I'm going to let this thicken a little bit more before I add my corn. I've got just a can of corn here. You can use frozen corn or canned. The recipe called for frozen, but we have canned, so we're going to use what we have. And I think personally I do like the taste of the canned corn better than the frozen. So if I have my choice, I do prefer the canned. And you just want to make sure you've gotten as much of the liquid as you can out of your can of corn before you put it in, because you don't want to water down this amazing cream sauce. And at the end, this recipe calls for some Parmesan cheese. We are going to use some Romano cheese. Romano cheese is what we have on hand, and we love it. It is a great substitute for Parmesan, and I kind of like the flavor of the Romano a little bit better. So we are going to use that, and I'm just going to use my fork here to now combine this corn with the sauce. And I'm going to just let this simmer for a few minutes just for the corn to heat through. But essentially, this side dish is done. Now, we could have really just served plain corn with this country fried steak. Country fried steak is rich, and it obviously has kind of a creamy gravy on it. But this recipe just sounded really good. So we do have sort of two creamy things we're serving tonight. But you know what? It sounded good, and we really wanted to try this recipe, so that's what we're doing. So I'm just going to let that simmer a little bit. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup or so of this Romano cheese, maybe a little bit more. You can measure that with your heart too. And I think this is going to be amazing. All right, so we're going to let that come to temperature. And our potatoes are working. They are coming to boil. They're covered and they've got a high heat under them. So next we will make our country fried steak. Our corn is ready and it's delicious. I can't even imagine why we haven't made this before. It's so good. Our potatoes are boiling away. That's going to take a little longer. So I'm going to get these biscuits buttered. And this is just the seasoning packet that comes with the biscuits mixed with melted 1/2 stick of butter. Put some of this on top of all these biscuits with my little silicone brush. This is amazing. This brush is great. It helps to, apply butter to baked goods and maybe even like barbecue sauce to meat. And it's much better than a spoon because with a spoon, you've got to be precise about where you're pouring it. But this silicone brush is great because you just kind of dip it in whatever you've got, like whatever sauce or liquid you're using, and then just dot it on top of what you want to butter or sauce up, and it does the job. So here we go. I'm just using up every last bit of this butter because it smells and looks fabulous. It's almost like a garlic butter is what it smells like. And these cheddar biscuits with this delicious butter are going to be very much enjoyed tonight with dinner. So I'm going to set these aside, let them cool a little bit, and we are going to batter up some country fried steak. It is time to batter up our country fried steak. So I've got 2 eggs here. And these are going to go in this dish with some buttermilk. Now, I need 2 cups of buttermilk for this recipe, but I don't want to buy a whole thing of buttermilk and then use it for this recipe and then it just sits in the fridge and goes bad. So anytime a recipe calls for buttermilk, all I do is use a little bit less than the amount that it calls for. So this is supposed to be 2 cups of milk, so I'm going to actually... I'm going to pour out some of this milk because I have a little bit too much, but that is okay because what I want to do is add a little bit of vinegar to the milk to turn it into buttermilk. So instead of buying a carton of buttermilk and having it go bad in my fridge on me, I just take the regular milk that I have and I just add a couple of dashes of vinegar. Now this is rice wine vinegar. You can use rice wine vinegar, you can use white vinegar, you could probably even use apple cider vinegar. It does not matter. You just want vinegar to get in contact with the milk and then it'll kind of start to curdle it, and that's what you need. So you don't need to buy a whole big carton of buttermilk when a recipe calls for it. Just use a little bit less of the liquid than it originally called for and add the vinegar to that total amount, and you can use it for baked goods or cooking or whatever you want to do. Now, we're going to let that vinegar curdle that milk a little bit. While that's happening, I'm just going to scramble up these eggs because we are going to mix the buttermilk with the eggs in a moment, and then we'll dredge our meat in the flour, the egg mixture, and then the flour. And I'm just checking my recipe. If I need a little more egg mixture, I can always make some more, but this should be plenty. I also like to add, like if I'm just whisking eggs and I'm not adding any other kind of liquid to it, I like to add a little water. I find that adding the water to the eggs helps them to whisk together more quickly, but this buttermilk is going to be going in here in a moment, so we're not going to do that. because we'll have the buttermilk there soon. Now this is just plain all-purpose flour. I'm going to season this up so that our country fried steak tastes delicious. I'm going to use a generous amount of black pepper. There will also be black pepper in the pan gravy that we make. I'm going to use some of our homemade garlic powder. I'm going to use some onion powder. And I'm going to use some seasoned salt. Now you could just use regular salt if you want, but seasoned salt is wonderful and adds such a good flavor. And then I'm just going to mix this together. You want your flour to be well seasoned because we're going to coat that meat in the flour twice. So you just want your flour to be very flavorful. You don't want boring, bland fried steak is basically what we're making. It's called country fried steak or chicken fried steak. And you know what? I'm going to do just a little bit more of the seasoned salt. Okay. So now if you can see this, the milk is started to kind of lump up a little bit. That's what the vinegar does to it. So we're going to pour that in with our egg. And this is going to be part of our dredging mixture for our country fried steak. So just going to mix that together. And now we are going to take our meat and we're going to dredge this. Thank you, handsome husband. They're cube steaks. These are actual cube steaks. We bought a quarter cow not that long ago from our local Heartland Abattoir. We love that place and they are amazing. And when you give your cutting order to them, their cube steaks, they take care of for you. They take the meat and they slice it and then they tenderize it so that it's absolutely perfect. Now I'm going to do my best to keep this hand dry because after dipping in the flour and then the egg, I'm going back to the flour again. And I want to be able to touch this flour without ending up with a gloppy mess on my hands. So we're going to really get this coated nicely so there's no spots that are uncovered. You don't want there to be like excess flour, but you don't want there to be spots of the beef that are not covered at all. So we're just going to make sure that we've done it twice, and then I'm just going to move it to my tray here to sit before we fry it. So we'll keep going with that. So flour, nice coating of that seasoned flour, and then get it here in this buttermilk and egg mixture. And then use this hand to get that nice and coated. And then get that back here in the flour. And I'm purposely using a bigger container for the flour because I need to have room to get these steaks in here nice and flat and get them nicely covered with the flour. So I didn't want to smush them in a container this size. I knew for the liquid this size would be fine, but for the flour or for the dry mixture, I wanted to have a bigger dish. So there's our second one. And we have a total of 8 steaks that we're cooking. When we get our meat from the Heartland Abattoir, they put 4 cube steaks per package. So we're going to cook up all of our cube steak tonight. And this does make good leftovers. It's really still tasty leftover. Although it's best fresh hot out of the pan, it is still tasty leftover. So now we're going to let that excess liquid drip off. And then go back into that flour. And I'm going to get the rest of these coated, and then we'll show you how to cook them up. Our country fried steaks are all coated and ready to go, so I'm just going to move these back here. We're going to get those frying in a minute, but for now, we are going to mash up our potatoes. Mashing potatoes is something I generally do at my sink. I normally have my potatoes in my sink, my pot on the counter next to it, and I mash my potatoes that way. But I wanted to show you how I do it. So I am going to put a whole stick of butter in there. That butter happens to be frozen, but no need to worry. It is going to melt real quick because this pot is still very hot from boiling these potatoes. I have a half a stick of cream cheese that I have chopped up into little pieces. That whole amount is going in. I also have some sour cream here. and I will take probably about a cup of sour cream and put it in. I don't really measure it. I've made potatoes like this for so long that I just kind of know what I want them to look like. I'm going to leave the sour cream there because I might need more. I may taste it later and add a little bit more. I'm also going to scrape sort of all the little bits of this cream cheese off this wrapper because there is still quite a bit of it on here. So I'll get that in there. No need to worry about that. And I'm going to get a little bit of milk in here. Now, I'm not exactly sure how much milk I'm going to need, so I'll start with about, I don't know, a cup or so. I can always add more, but I just kind of dumped in some milk, and then all of that is going to start to melt here and combine together in my hot pot, and that is going to be great. Now, these potatoes are piping hot, and this is a potato ricer. I do not use a hand mixer or a masher to make my potatoes ever. I do not like the texture. I know that doing this is a little bit of extra work. It might be easier if I was just to mix them together. I don't really like lumpy potatoes, and I don't like gummy or pasty potatoes. And so I've used a potato ricer to make my potatoes for a very long time. And this is how I prefer to make it. And this potato ricer does make it easy. All you do is scoop your potatoes in and shoot them right into your pan. And that is it. It couldn't be easier. And your potatoes will be literally creamy and smooth and wonderful. And you didn't have to sit there with a hand mixer and then clean the beaters. And you didn't have to mash, using like a hand masher. So just, again, I'm going to run all of these potatoes through this ricer. And it doesn't matter if I've got 1 pound or 5 pounds. It really doesn't take that long to do. So I just keep scooping and pushing them through. And once I've got all of the potatoes in this pan, I will give everything a stir, and that is when I will add some salt and pepper, and then I'll check the texture. If I need a little bit more milk, I can add a little more milk. If it's not tangy enough and I want a little more of the sour cream, I can do that. I generally stick with the 1 stick of butter and the half a brick of cream cheese. Those I don't tend to add more of those. You certainly can. If my family members want to dot a little bit of extra butter on the top of their mashed potatoes when they go to eat them, they absolutely can. But our country fried steak tonight is going to actually have some gravy on it. So they may actually want gravy on their potatoes instead of butter. So I leave that up to them. But I am just ricing my potatoes into this pot. And as you can see, it is not horribly difficult, and it is not horribly time consuming. And honestly, the potatoes come out so creamy that I just don't do it any other way. I've stuck with this for years now. It's probably been at least a good 15 years that I've used a ricer. And I don't think I'm ever going back. So. And this little bit of potato that ends up at the top of the ricer, it ends up being smushed just fine. I don't tend to push it back through. Just the pressure of pushing those potatoes on the bottom out will sometimes scooch some up the sides, and that's fine. They're adequately mashed. You don't have to worry about it. And this was about 5 pounds of mashed potatoes. So my stick of butter, my half a brick of cream cheese, the milk, the sour cream, that's for 5 pounds of potatoes. If you make less potatoes, that's okay. And just kind of cut those ingredients down accordingly. But I always make a big batch of potatoes and then freeze my leftovers or pop them in the fridge if I know we're going to have something during the week where we can use them, and it comes in handy. So I make a big batch of potatoes every so often, and then they're good to go when I want them. So that is the last of it. Now, the one thing you are going to want to do is clean your colander and clean your potato ricer right away. If you let all this stuff that's on the colander and the potato ricer sit for a long time, it does get really sticky and stuck. So you want to wash that as soon as you can. So I'm just going to slide this over, and now I'll give it a stir and see where I'm at. If I know I'm going to definitely need more milk. I can feel that. So we'll add some more of that. And this Dutch oven is going to keep these potatoes steaming hot. So we're going to cook up our steak next. But while our steak is cooking, these potatoes are going to stay nice and hot in here. I'm just going to put the cover on. Texture of this looks pretty good. I've got a dog who I think is finding some potato scraps on the floor. Is that good? And my big stick of butter here is kind of in the middle of these potatoes, and it is melting from the heat of everything. So I think now I'll add my pepper, nice fresh black pepper. Potatoes can use some salt. So I'm adding a little bit there of pink salt. I could always add more, and of course people can add more to their individual serving if they feel like it's not salty enough. But here, now my potatoes, see, they're so fluffy and they're so creamy. And now I'm just going to let this butter melt in here because it looks like they are nicely combined. So I think I used about a cup of milk, maybe a little more, 1.25 cups. That's what it took for these potatoes. And then I'm going to give them a taste real quick. Okay, excuse me, puppy. I just want to see if I have enough seasonings. They're perfect. I don't want any more sour cream. The tanginess in there is just right. But these are good to go. I'm going to get the lid on them, keep them warm, and now we're going to fry up our steak. We are ready now to cook our country fried steak. And so this is vegetable oil in a pan. Now I know there's a lot of folks out there that probably aren't going to want to cook with vegetable oil, and that is fine. You use whatever oil you are comfortable using. You're not going to want to use a flavorful olive oil for this. You need a very neutral flavor oil. And I'm just adding a couple drips of water to my pan. If you hear sizzling and you see bubbling, when you do that, that means your oil is hot enough to fry. So now I'm going to take my steaks and get them going. So once we get that one going and cooking, hopefully I'll be able to slide it over and get another one in there with it. And we're going to get these cooking. I was able to get a second steak in there, so we are just going to cook these up. And I will show you what we look like when we're flipped. When you flip your steaks, you should see some nice browning on both sides. And you don't want to overcook these because you want them to be cooked through. This is not a steak that you're going to be eating like medium rare. You're going to eat this cooked all the way, but you don't want it to be dried out. So a nice golden brown like this is basically what you're looking for. And again, just make sure they're cooked through all the way. Then we're going to take these out of the pan and we're going to put them on a sheet tray that we've lined with a paper bag. The paper bag will absorb any excess oil from the steak, and then when we serve them, they're not going to be greasy. This is our second batch of country fried steak. I just flipped them and they're looking golden brown and delicious on their first side. The secret is don't mess with them. If they are sticking to the bottom of the pan, they are not ready to flip. Give them that full 3 to 5 minutes on each side and let them tell you when it's safe to flip them. You don't want to rip off half of this flour and egg mixture that we fought so hard to get on there in the first place. So make sure that you are not flipping multiple times if you don't need to, and make sure that you let the steak release from the pan before you try to flip it. So we are almost done frying up our country fried steak. We've got 2 more to go after this. What we've done is put our oven on warm, and we have put our country fried steaks on that tray with that paper bag in the oven to keep warm. We have also put our corn in the oven to keep warm and our pot of mashed potatoes in there. So everything will be nice and warm and ready to go when these steaks are made. All I'll have to do is just make our pan gravy as soon as I've cooked the last 2 steaks, and we will have a delicious meal right on the table ready to go. Our last batch of meat now is coming out of the pan. And all we have to do is make our gravy, and I'm going to show you how we do that. All right, so to make our gravy, we need some of those drippings in the pan with a little bit of oil, and we want 3 tablespoons of flour with that. So I'm going to sprinkle the flour over the surface of the oil. And now I'm going to whisk that with the fat here to cook the raw flour flavor off. And it looks like we need just a little bit more oil, which I kind of poured off and reserved, and that's fine. So I am going to just let this hot oil and flour kind of come together. I'm using it to scrape off some of these delicious bits off the bottom of the pan. That is going to be delicious. I don't mind those little bits in my gravy. They're going to add so much flavor. If you really wanted to, you could scrape them completely out of the pan, but honestly, they do add such delicious flavor because that's all been sitting in the pan with the meat juices and the oil while the meat cooked, and it's going to be really tasty. So we're just going to let this oil and flour kind of bubble away for a moment or two. Again, we don't want that raw flour taste in the gravy, so we're going to let that simmer for a moment or two. We're going to slowly pour in 2 cups of milk, and we're going to make our gravy with this. And so the flour here and the oil are going to thicken up this milk. And you kind of saw this on a smaller scale when I made our creamed corn. But this is going to make a delicious, very rich pan gravy that we're going to serve on top of our country fried steak. I will season this with a little salt and pepper if it needs it. Now, these kind of recipes, they're certainly not everyday meals around this house. I've been showing, I know, a lot of beef recipes lately, and that's because we got a quarter cow not that long ago, so we're using up all of those delicious cuts of meat. And when we start to run out of beef, that's fine. We'll kind of switch off on and off between seafood and fish and chicken and pork. But when we have it on hand, we absolutely love to use the fresh beef that we have. And so that is why on the channel lately you're seeing a lot of beef recipes. I've done short ribs, I've done brisket, I've done some pot roasts in the slow cooker. I think there's a couple shorts on that. And so we absolutely do not eat beef on a daily basis. We eat it probably twice a month. And you're just kind of seeing these videos as I make them. But we certainly do not eat beef on a regular basis. But these cube steaks are absolutely delicious, tender, really flavorful. And even though cube steaks tend to be sort of like a more challenging cut of meat as it can be tough, this Heartland Abattoir near us is amazing, and the meat that they have is so high quality, and these cube steaks are going to be wonderful. So anyway, I'm going to let this gravy here come to a simmer. And as it bubbles and kind of simmers, it's going to thicken a little bit more. And I'm going to take this opportunity just to add a little bit of black pepper. And I'll check to see if I need salt in a moment. But I'm just going to let this thicken and bubble, and then dinner will be ready, and I will make up a plate and show you what we've got. I've added a little bit more pepper and some salt to this gravy, and now it is nice and thick. So we're going to plate up our dinner. Our country fried steak dinner is ready to go, so I am going to serve myself up some food here. One of those biscuits somehow disappeared, so I'm not sure who might have done that, but Anyway, we'll get some potatoes, and there's just a little bit of butter on the surface of them, which is wonderful. We've got some of this lovely looking corn. And I am going to put some of the gravy here on my meat. Now, I like to leave half of my meat without gravy and half with some. That way I can kind of take some and like dip it in. So I'm going to give this a taste and see how we did. I am very excited. I haven't had this in a long time. And that came out so good. Very, very tender and juicy. And let's try these potatoes. Perfect and creamy. If you have never used a potato ricer, please do yourself a favor and try one out. It is amazing. This creamed corn, because we added a little sugar, it's a little sweet and a little creamy. It's not the same kind of creamy as this gravy. It almost feels lighter. And the corn is really, really fresh and nice. Still has some nice texture to it because it's canned corn and not frozen. And then I'm just going to grab a little of this biscuit. This is going to be a phenomenal meal. We're going to absolutely enjoy this. I wanted to thank you so much for joining me here in the Pickup Kitchen. I am glad that you have been taking the time to hang out with me while I cook a nice dinner for my family, and it is so much appreciated. If you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Good night.